So the West, the IMF, the World Bank want to remain in the 20th century. Let's construct the 21st century. Well, I worked 8 years at the IMF in Washington, D.C. as the executive director for Brazil and other countries. And from Washington, I moved to Shanghai to be one of the founding members of the New Development Bank. So I know the old financial world, the IMF, and I know a bit the new financial world, potentially new financial world, of which the NDB is a part. Now, what is the challenge now? The existing monetary and financial system that was created and is still controlled by the West is becoming increasingly rigid and increasingly politicized in the worst sense of the world. The West, meaning basically the United States and Europe, they use the old financial institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, the SWIFT, the dollar system, as political weapons against countries they believe are not cooperative, are unruly, hostile. So they have a blacklist. And the blacklist gets no treatment or bad treatment. The white list are the countries that are satellites to the Western order. Say Ukraine, Argentina now. So Ukraine and Argentina get a lot of money and support from the World Bank, the IMF, with little questions asked, especially in the case of Ukraine. So we have the main challenge in the world financial and economic system today is how we, the global South countries, BRICS countries, how do we face up to the fact that the West, especially the US under Trump, is ruthlessly destroying the economic system and the financial system they created. And this makes our life much more difficult than it could be if we had a more cooperative world. Huh? Well, you see, the BRICS created the New Development Bank. Back then, we were 5 countries negotiating this around 2012, 2014. We did this because we thought that reform of the World Bank, of the IMF, was basically stalled and that the West would not move. So we said, in other words, something like this. So the West, the IMF, the World Bank want to remain in the 20th century. Let's construct the 21st century, where the global majority, the global South, will have a voice, representation, and where they will have their interests taken into account. So that's what I think we should understand. Our expectation was really ambitious when we came to create the New Development Bank. It was to launch a new system, gradually launch something that would work better for the world, and especially for the developing countries, than the current distorted, politicized Western financial system. In the world, in the last decades, a lot of cooperation mechanisms have been constituted. Some are more successful, some are less successful. The G20, for example, was very important, very successful in 2008, 2009, when it became a leaders forum. The West at the time was in a deep financial crisis, and they needed support from China, from Brazil, from Russia, from India, other countries. So they were willing to, work in the G20 context to promote reform. In exchange of promises of reform, we gave money. We gave money basically to the IMF on a large scale so that it could withstand the turbulence initiated in the financial systems of the United States and Europe. That was the context. Now the G20 has become, I would say, almost irrelevant, really. Why? Because there's a geopolitical split among G20 members. You have Russia, China on the one hand, and the West on the other, Europeans and the Americans. They simply do not talk, So G20 does not reach any practical conclusions. Its communiques are increasingly lengthy, but increasingly empty. So I don't expect the G20 to do anything. The BRICS is a different matter. The BRICS is struggling to become effective, but it has potential to become more effective. It has created the New Development Bank, headquartered here in Shanghai. It has created a monetary fund called the Contingent Reserve Arrangement, and it is discussing new monetary initiatives in light of the fact that the dollar standard is becoming increasingly distorted and even dangerous for us. Every developing country has its own specificities. Take the case of China, the rising middle income power in the world. The fact is that China's rise is unstoppable whether the West likes it or not. China will continue to grow. It may suffer ups and downs like everybody, but its long-term trend, I think, is clear. Now, the West, and especially the US, do not accept that. They've been trying in Republican governments, in Democratic governments, no matter what political party is in power in the US, they're trying to throttle, to contain, to strangle China's progress through economic, commercial, technological sanctions. China has done its best to make a peaceful cooperation with the West. It has. Now, I think China is awakening to the fact that peaceful cooperation will be an exception, and that geopolitical struggle between China and the West will be the main feature of its international relations of China going forward. I perceive these global initiatives from China, from President Xi Jinping, as representing a change in China's stance. China, since Deng Xiaoping initiated reforms and opening of the economy and the growth, rapid growth, China was keeping a low profile, trying to keep a low profile. Now, it is difficult for an elephant to keep a low profile. So China became a target. And in the way the West behaves against China and against many other countries has led to a loss of credibility, to a loss of soft power. So I assume that the reason President Xi Jinping has launched all these global initiatives is to show the world, look, we have a violent West in decay, hurts, harms, does not cooperate, but we Chinese are willing to give a different approach, offer a different approach to the world. So China is now going global in its rhetoric and its proposals, but it will be more effective, in my view, for China to see these initiatives, to launch these initiatives, to make them more concrete in coordination with other countries of the so-called Global South, like Brazil, India, Indonesia, Russia. I know relations with India are complicated, but even so, we can hope that these relations will become better. Because China, together with these other, basically BRICS countries, can make more of a difference than China alone. Let me put it this way. The dollar system is gradually declining. I don't think it will recover its former prestige for many reasons. And the gradual decline may continue, or the United States may move into collapse. So what would the collapse look like? It would be another major financial crisis. The last one was in 2008, 2009. That would come from the bursting of the bubble, financial bubble that we now see in the United States financial markets. If this bubble bursts, this will cause major turbulence, and the US is in a weaker position than it was back in 2008, 2009. So I think we should recognize the fact that when this bubble bursts, when this crisis erupts and the dollar system collapses, the world will be scrambling for new ideas. So we need to discuss new ideas. I personally favor an approach where a coalition of countries from BRICS and non-BRICS, say 20, 15 countries, would come together to build something that was never there, which is an international reserve currency. Supranational, not global, because not everyone would join, especially not the West, but something that could be presented to the world as a positive alternative to the weak, politically charged dollar system, dollar and euro system. So it's a tall order, but I think we in the BRICS, Chinese, Brazilians, Russians, others, should start to debate this question in depth, because we cannot expect anytime soon, or ever, I would say, to be back in a situation where the dollar system would be beneficial to us. That's gone. Even beyond Trump, we will have the problem there, maybe increasing. Every superpower, when it enters into decline, or let's say many superpowers, when they enter into decline, they become violent. They become more aggressive. And I think that's what we're seeing now with the US, and this is doing major harm, for example, to the dollar system itself. So we need to, rise to the challenge of thinking independently, and thinking not only of our own countries, but also of the global South as a whole, and even of the world as a whole. We can always hope that in the future, say in 20, 30 years, this geopolitical conflict will be overcome, and we can join all nations to create a new global international currency, not a national one like the dollar was, like the pound sterling was, but a new multinational global currency that would function better than what we have had before in economic history.
大家好，我是主播周玉琴。很多的朋友告诉我们，太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌帮助了睡眠品质。有季节敏感、代谢困扰、关心异常细胞风险的好朋友呢，可以选择原版的太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌。它添加有超级食物羽衣甘蓝，健康再加分。而有睡眠困扰的朋友们，赶快选择蓝色包装这一款晚安加强版，绝对是更有感。每日克菲尔，时刻美好 ，Good Feel Good， 请上快点购为健康下单，而且要记得输入推荐代码，有额外的折扣优惠。太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌基础版、晚安加强版，新包装改版，内容不变，抽取更方便。要吃就吃最好的。